Sound speeds, and welcome to another episode of the podcast that replaces speed bumps. We're still in our trial period, so we're in episode 3 now of 10. I don't know how we're doing so far. I'm not going to look at the numbers until I'll probably get closer to episode 8. That way I can try to get a better idea of how the performance is doing. Because I must admit, they're a lot easier for me to produce than it is a normal episode. Why is it so oh, they're doing construction over there. Brilliant. It's a lot easier to produce one of these, and I'm able to tackle 2 topics as opposed to one in a video. And so it's actually coming across as very beneficial to people, which I do appreciate. So we're going to, in this 3rd episode, we're going to talk about one thing pertaining to shotgun microphones and one thing pertaining to lavalier microphones. And I hope that you find it just as beneficial as you do other episodes, if you find them beneficial. If not, I hope you find this beneficial. But let's not waste no more time and get right into it. One question that I was asked in a previous episode's comments and then follow up via email was about pistol grips and why they're used. Because if you look at boom poles, you don't need to have a pistol grip in order to actually go on the end of a boom pole. The boom pole comes up and then you mount a Zeppelin to it, or a shock mount of any kind. And then from there, you can do whatever you want to with it. You don't need to have a pistol grip. So what is the purpose of them? Well, I was not there when the first pistol grip was created, but if I were to guess, it is so that you can hand hold and point the Zeppelin where you want it to go. However, it has a very limited purpose, but it allows for versatility. Let me tackle this in opposite order. So versatility. If you want to mount on the end of a boom pole, you have that ability. If you want to hand hold it and just walk out and point it at something, like you're pointing at birds, let's say, or you're at a sporting event and you want to use a handle to hold on to it because you don't want to carry an actual boom pole with you, you can do that if you have a pistol grip. But if you don't have a pistol grip and you have the Zeppelin with just the place for it to mount to a boom pole at the bottom, you don't have the ability to point it at anything unless you mount it to a boom pole or an external handle. You have that ability if you have a pistol grip, but not if you don't. However, it is versatile, meaning that people can, manufacturers can actually produce pistol grips on their Zeppelins, and people will buy them because they can say, look, you can do so many things with this. You can put it on the end of a boom pole, or you can hand hold it, whatever you want to do. But you have to pay more if you want a, for example, Rycote modular shock mount that doesn't have a pistol grip. Yes, you have to pay more for that. It's another one of those things of, in this world, oh, you don't want that? Well, then we're going to charge you more for it. And so pistol grips have very limited purpose. Basically, if you're hand holding something, and I did it in a previous episode of this, I think I talked about how you could point a pistol grip, use a pistol grip and point your finger at whatever you want the sound source to be picked up in the microphone. But that is pretty much the purpose of a pistol grip. But you don't always use them. Now, why is it that most of the time when you look behind the scenes at people that have Zeppelins, why is it that they could have a pistol grip on their boom, and their Zeppelin rather, when they are doing a behind the scenes on a movie or something like that? Why is there a pistol grip? Plain and simple, it's because it costs more money if you want one that doesn't have a pistol grip. Rode doesn't make one, to my knowledge, without a pistol grip. Many third-party places don't. Rycote is the only company, and probably Radius, that that doesn't offer a Zeppelin that has a pistol grip built into it. Most companies do. And if you want to buy one of their Zeppelins that is going to be more discount, you're going to pay even less for, one of these, like a Rode or some of these other companies, than you would a Rycote. But even then, it is cheaper to get one with a pistol grip than paying for even more money towards one that doesn't have one. Now you may say, but it's less material. True enough. But if it is a selling feature for a manufacturer to say, but this also includes a pistol grip and it's for this particular price, as opposed to a company that says, well, our prices are more expensive, and then if you want to get the modular one that doesn't have the pistol grip with this windscreen, then you can pay more for it. What are most people going to do? They're going to go ahead and get the one that has a pistol grip. So if you look behind the scenes and you see pistol grips on them, that's probably the reason why, is because they cost more money to or they're cheaper actually to produce one with a pistol grip because it's more versatile than it is to have one with and one without, or to just sell the handle as an external item. Now, there are some manufacturers like Sinella that doesn't really do pistol grips at all. They are just the Zeppelin, and it has built onto the bottom of it the place for you to mount it to your boom pole. There's a reason why Sinella makes specifically the best, in my opinion, shock mount Zeppelins on the market. It's because they have increased wind protection without a whole lot of extra weight to them, and yet they are designed exactly for the end of a boom pole. You don't need to have a handle or anything like that for them. If you're going to be holding it and pointing at something, you're going to have it at the end of a boom pole if you're a boom operator. So there you go. That's one of the reasons why, or at least that's the reason I speculate from my years of experience in the film industry as to why people would manufacture some Zeppelins with a handle and some without. I hate with a passion the fact that I'm hand-holding a lav in this segment, but there's a reason why, and that's because of what I'm doing in this segment, talking about lav mics. Now, in the previous segment, I was wearing it on my chest because it serves no purpose and doesn't add anything to this podcast for me to be hand-holding it. So, let's waste no time and start talking about lav mics. I'm going to basically put my finger right here, exactly where the capsule is. I want you to listen to my voice right now. Now, omnidirectional microphones are considered to be omnidirectional. That doesn't mean it's even in all directions. If I were to keep the capsule in the exact same place, but pointed exactly in the opposite direction, do you hear a difference in my voice? I haven't changed anything else, just the capsule is pointed away from my face. Because this is an omnidirectional pattern microphone, it is going to be supposedly able to pick up all frequencies even around me. But as you've heard me say in the past, it's not about the frequency response. There's other things to sound than just the frequency response. For example, in the case of a lav mic, directionality. You may say it's omnidirectional, it picks up everything evenly. No, it doesn't. It may pick up all frequencies evenly, but it picks up in less detail. This is the reason why I did a video a while back called the microphone spec that we want but will never get. Because right now I'm in optimum detail, but as soon as I point this away from me, facing the exact same, it's in the capsule is in the exact same place, but now it's pointing exactly away from me. It is now going to be picking up my voice in lesser detail, because detail is something that is it's based on line of sight to a capsule in many ways. So that is a little bit for you to consider. So that means that if I'm wearing a lav on my chest, it is pointed directly up at my mouth. And there's something called chin shadow, which is this area that's between the mouth, which would prevent the lavalier microphone, if it had eyes, from seeing my mouth. What you want to do is hopefully get it out enough in front so that way it gets past my chin. Most of the time, you can put it directly against someone's chest, and their spine and everything will hold backwards more. Like I'm leaning forward a little bit towards the camera right now, trying to keep my face and stuff out of this light. But if I were not leaning backwards, and if I put my neck back where it would normally be, if I didn't have a neck that naturally pulled forward a little bit, then what would happen is this lav would be in direct line of sight to my chest, like it is on most people that are on camera. But if you don't have this luxury of putting something directly on the center of the chest, and you, for example, have to put it up inside of a collar, if you put it up higher, like up here, or even up here, notice how it sounds now. It is going to sound more throaty because this lavalier, which is now underneath my chin, is now in what's called the chin shadow. It is no longer able to see my mouth direct line of sight. And for that reason, it's picking up my sound a little bit lesser so in the highs. The mids and highs, the high mids and the highs are going to be dissipated. So that's the sound right there that is more sibilance related, that's more for picking up and clarity and detail in someone's voice. It doesn't have that luxury when it can't see line of sight to my mouth. Now, it is going to be a little bit hotter than it would be if I put the microphone down here. But down here is against the chest cavity where bass resonates from. So you're probably going to have a better bass response from the lav when it's on my chest. And it's going to be more line of sight to my mouth. So that's going to allow it to pick up even better. Now, sometimes what people will do is they will put it inside of a tie flipped downwards. Well, when you do that, it's basically out of necessity because a tie is a great place to put a microphone. And when it's right here, you may say, well, this area it's pointed downwards. Why would you put it inside of a tie if a tie is basically going to make it a direct chamber down here? Well, the tie itself blocks out a lot of exterior type sound. And because your mouth is right here and the tie is worn way up high on the neck and pointed slightly downwards, it actually kind of creates an effect that is somewhat beneficial to your sound. It's a lot better than putting a lav underneath a tie, which basically smothers the lav. It's going to do nothing but scratch and make all kinds of noise. Plus, it's going to be muffled. But if you put it inside of a tie, the tie itself, it basically completely removes, or at least attenuates a lot of the surrounding area except what's directly down the barrel. And down the barrel happens to be where the sound is going to come into and enter the tie from. Being that it's this close to your mouth, and a mouth basically speaks into like a little bubble. This is the area that's normally picked up best by a lav. It's an area that's maybe about 8 to 10 inches around, maybe up to a foot depending on the microphone model. But if you put it inside of a tie, it's going to sound a little bit different than this because I'm also inside of a vehicle right now where you're probably hearing some reflections because I am with my ears, reflections off of the glass and everything around me. But if it's inside of a tie, it's technically a little bit less detail, but then the sound is going to be entering in from only one axis. Because it's closing out all the other axes, the detail that comes into a microphone through the capsule is going to be a little bit off axis, but it's going to be picked up only in the front side of the microphone capsule. So that's going to help it a little bit, even though it's not ideal. Inside of a tie is going to be fine. Now, lavs are not designed to be handheld, but a lot of people love to do content creation holding lavs and looking like a complete idiot. But that's the way a lot of people do is they put it in the front of their mouths, sometimes with the windscreen on there. I don't need it if I'm inside of here, even though I may be popping the microphone, I don't know. But when they handhold a lav up in front of their face, it looks like complete crap on camera, number one. Number two is it is pretending that this is a large diaphragm microphone or something like that that's going to be close to a mouth or a little bit farther away. It doesn't really matter because it's basically on axis to the mouth. As long as you gain stage it correctly, it should be okay technically, except for the fact that it looks terrible. And because a lav is not designed to be handheld, people usually use these clips and they use that in order to give themselves a handle to hold onto it as if it's a stick mic. But if you do happen to handhold it in front of you, you're no longer getting the chest resonating against the lav mic and being picked up directly by the capsule. So it's going to sound a lot more tinny, a lot more high pitched than it would be if it's picking up the resonation from my bass in my voice very close to it and then still pointing up at my microphone, at my mouth. Now, in case you're curious, in post, all I'm doing is leveling the sound. I'm not going to be EQing it or changing it in any way. There's no noise reduction or anything. All I'm doing is leveling it so that all the levels are brought up to a more even level of about -16 LUFS, which is going to be great for YouTube. So, being that we're inside of a vehicle, let's do a couple other things too. If I were to use this as a plant, for example, and you're probably hearing a little bit of noise coming off this, and this is very visible to the camera right now, but this would be more line of sight and using the lav against a surface. You normally wouldn't want to put it on this kind of a clip, so the lav itself would be mounted something more like this. And using an adhesive, you put it onto a surface. Using this surface is going to create kind of a boundary layer type effect out of it. You put a lav against a flat surface, sound is only going to be picked up from 180 degrees on that surface. And therefore, the pickup pattern of that microphone is going to be basically doubled. It's going to be looking for sound from the other direction, but it's going to be picking up the reflection of that sound as it comes in at lower detail, unless it's directly down the barrel as it's facing out, in which case it's still going to be picking up more ideal. But this lav right now is laying horizontally to the surface, so it's picking up directly across, which means that my voice as it hits this is going to be traveling over the flat surface a lot better than it would be if you were just holding it in the air. If I were to take this lav from the same exact distance and raise it up, you lose something. You lose the ability of it playing off of another surface and basically creating almost a resonation from that bass that hits it and kind of dissipates there for a second. If it's floating up in the air like it is right now, you are losing that. But you are a little bit more line of sight, I guess, to my mouth. I mean, because if it's down here, it may not be pointing directly at my mouth. It's still pointing more or less at it, but here I can put it directly at my mouth. Also, this is more like overhead miking. This is not a microphone designed for overhead miking though. If I put it directly up here, it's not ideal at all. if you put it on a head, on your forehead, for example, this cable is going to drive me nuts. If you put it directly on your forehead and it's mounted there, it's going to be very much line of sight to your mouth as long as it can get through your nose. But that shouldn't be a big issue, except that you are far enough away from the resonation of your chest cavity to be able to hear that in a reduced manner. So you're going to hear the detail parts, the mids and highs, and say, oh, that sounds pretty good, because you were able to pick up all the detail in my voice. But you got to listen for the bass too, because the bass isn't going to be there. If it's down here, you're going to hear that bass response. You're going to hear most of the detail in my voice, even though you might get a little bit less of it because it's having to go through my chin a little bit. But even then, on top of my forehead, if I have a big nose, might be a little bit more difficult for the mic to pick up everything there. Now, because this is inside of a vehicle, I'm going to clip this. Actually, I just spun it around. I didn't need to do that. I'm going to clip this up here, so you're going to have to see the cable hanging down brilliantly. Now, if you look at that, you'll notice that it's actually angled directly over my head right now. You may say that's not very good at all. But if you notice, it doesn't sound terrible, does it? And that's, I mean, if you're, and I'm not talking about necessarily reflections. Reflections are something you can't really get rid of in a car without bringing out Fernie pads. If I put something like that in front of the window here, my light's going to go away. But with this right here, you may say it's angled directly over my head. But keep in mind, I'm still within the pattern because it's omnidirectional. And because my mouth can still line of sight see the capsule, it's not going to be doing a whole lot negative to the sound. This is not a chest cavity by any means, but you're still able to pick up a lot of the detail from my voice right there in the inside of a visor. Now, most of the time, if you have a plant mic inside of a visor, what you want to try to do is get it as close as you can. So in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mount it like this overhead, where I'm going to point it directly downwards. And let me see if I can actually get the cable out of the way so you can see it a little easier here. Okay. So now the microphone is going to be directly overhead miking me. It's pointed directly downwards. Compare that sound now to the way it was before. This should sound different because it's going to be higher detail, being that it's pointed directly in my mouth and pointed away from the surface up there. But it's not going to be extremely drastic, not like hand holding it here versus a chest. It's still up against a surface like this, but it's now pointed more directly downwards. So the detail is going to be higher than it would be if I'm playing the edge of the detail pattern. So as another thing you might end up doing if you're not placing it on top of a surface like here, you may decide you're going to hide the microphone down here. Now, I'm not using adhesives or anything like that. If I put it down here, it is now down here closer to my chest, pointed upwards, and it's still line of sight to my mouth. So this may be okay in many cases because it's playing against a surface. You can't really see it very well from there, but it is literally right down here hidden. So it's hidden from the camera better than it was before. Now, the main thing you're going to lose here is if I breathe out of my nose a lot. I'm going to be blowing. You hate that, I'm sure. Not just the sound, but you might hate the fact that I'm breathing onto it. Breathing out of my nose directly onto a microphone is not a good sound. I hate that sound, as a matter of fact. So you might end up having to use wind protection on there if you don't otherwise use it normally. Now, you may say, well, what if I put this farther away? Well, here's the thing. A lav mic is designed to be used maybe up to about 12 inches away, depending on what it is. If I were to put it over here on the dash, let's put it right over here. Sure, I'll turn it upside down, fine, because you don't want to go anywhere else. Now I'm going to be picking up more of that front window. As a matter of fact, the microphone now is closer to that window than it is my mouth, which means it's going to be picking up the sound off of the window and back, increasing the echo and reverb. That's not good at all. My voice is going to be attenuated some because I've now doubled the distance between here and here. Double the distance away from something or cut the distance by half. And what does it do? It increases or decreases the actual signal strength by about 6 or a 3 dB, depending on what it is. Watch my video and I explain how and when. In this case, though, it's reduced it quite a bit, meaning that when it's here, the distance from here to here is going to be about half of what it is right now. And that's my signal is going to be my signal is going to be quite a bit hotter than it is when the microphone is farther away. Let's put it back over there. However, from here to here, if the lav is right there, it's only this distance away from my mouth, but it's also that distance and back to my mouth, away from my mouth, which means that it's going to double the distance by the time it gets to here, double again by the time it gets back to here, and then a little bit more to my mouth, which is going to attenuate it by maybe closer to 14 decibels, the echo, reverb. As opposed to this, where it's going to be a difference of maybe 60 dB, because from here to here versus here to there, it's about double the distance between here and here. So you're going to hear more of that. It's going to be echoey, more echoey, and you're probably not liking that at all. Now, you may then say, well, what happens then if you put a pad or something behind it? That would help. So if I were to do the same exact thing, but I'm going to use my hand because you just want to fall off, don't you? Let's put you right there, same as you were before. I'm going to point it directly at my mouth, and now I'm going to use my hand and simply put it behind the lav, trying to take off some of the reflections off of the back of the window. Now, I'm going to make my voice sound about the same as it was before, trying to imitate the same kind of volume, because if I did lower it, you would hear less because of the way that the sound will travel. You would hear less of it because the energy in my voice is not going to be strong enough to bounce off the back wall. Now I'm going to remove my hand again, and you're going to hear that without any difference, this is the way it sounds. If you put my hand in the way, cupping around the lavalier microphone, I'll open up a little bit to the camera so you can see it, then it's going to be helping a little bit. So if you put a lav inside of something that's going to muffle around a little bit of the surface that you want to try to attenuate, even if it's a situation like this where you need it for lighting, you can still put a little cup or something like that around your lav to try to help channel and focus the sound more towards your mouth. The closer you get to the lav, the better it's going to be at dissipating that. So that's the reason why when it's put inside of a tie, it helps to channel the sound while reducing the outside sounds that would be coming into the microphone. It's going to help focus it. So as I slowly start to bring my hand in, I want you to listen to the sound. It is going to sound a little bit more closed off the more I start to do this. Sorry for actually hitting the microphone. I keep hitting it. I'm going to try to see if I can do this again. So we're going to try it one more time. Coming in, the shot is wider, and you can see that I'm coming in, and I'm going to start to block off some of these reflections right here. And now I'm blocking off more and more. I just touched the lav again. I just can't seem to help myself. And now I'm going to cup it all the way around, and I'm still line of sight to the capsule. There is an area where you can do too much covering. Right now might be borderline what it is, because it's creating basically a tube. So when you're placing a lav mic, you want to either listen to it directly if you have headphones and you can plug directly into the transmitter, or you say, hey, sound mixer, bring up this lav. I want to make sure that I can hear it correctly. And that would help you. So what if we were to take this and put it down here someplace? Well, the same kind of thing. It's still line of sight, and by now it's going to be picking up a little more of my chest. But you got to keep in mind, every place you put a lav mic is going to sound different based on what's around it, because everything around a lav affects the sound. That's the reason why if it's against the chest, my bass cavity, it's going to have increased bass. But it's starting to get a little bit out underneath my chin. If I brought my chin back a little bit, trying to sound more like I was standing more vertically, this is the way it would sound. But even then, I'm inside of this echoey, reverby front of a vehicle. If I put it out here in front of me, it's going to sound totally different. But then if I put it directly against the surface, it might sound a little bit different. If I put it farther away, it's going to sound a lot different, because it's not going to have that signal to noise ratio anymore. So the main thing to keep in mind about placing a lavalier microphone, whether it's on a person or it's inside of a vehicle, is you got to know the way it sounds. And by it, I mean the person's voice. The person's voice you're trying to pick up. You got to know the way that sounds. And then you want to try to make the microphone do what it needs to do to pick that sound up as good as possible. If it's a very bright microphone, like a Sanken COS 11D, then in that circumstance, it's going to be bright because of the nature of the microphone. But if you use something that's a little bit more flat, it's going to sound more flat as well. It's going to sound more like the actual person. So you got to understand the characteristics of the microphone that you're trying to hide and the surfaces that it's up against. So keep that in mind. So there you have it, another episode of this podcast. I don't want to say in the can. I did that. That was such a speed bumps thing. But I kind of want to say it because it sounded kind of cool whenever I said it. Until I started questioning whether or not it sounded good and if I needed to or not. I don't want to do that. I'm going to try to come up with an episode of the episode. I'm going to try to come up with a name. I promise I can talk. I'm going to try to come up with a name of this in the next episode, by the next episode if I can. We'll see. I've gotten a lot of good suggestions. I think one of them stood out to me, but I don't remember what it is. I'm going to have to go back through all the suggestions and look at it and figure out what we want to call this for this test. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this episode. Thanks for listening and paying attention, and I will see you in the next episode of this podcast.